how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing well. In this video I'm going to rank all the books I read for Victober. Victober unfortunately has ended. Of course you can read Victorian literature any time of the year, but Victober itself is now over. And I read for Victober 11 books and 1 short story. I also did read a couple of poems. This video I'm going to rank all the books I read in Victober. Now all of them are great books, but of course there are some that I prefer over others. And as always, these are my own personal opinions. And if you disagree with my rankings, I would love to hear your comments down below. The Pickwick Papers by Charles Dickens. I really wanted to love this, mainly because an uncle of mine really loves this book and he really recommended that I read this book. But it was good in parts, don't get me wrong, I did like it. I just, for some reason, I just really couldn't get into it. Erewhon by Samuel Butler. I did a whole video devoted to Erewhon, so I will not go too much into it. It is a novel that I chose mainly because it's a Victorian novel and it's also inspired by my homeland New Zealand, so I thought it was a great way of combining the two. I liked it, but I thought it was quite average in many ways. The Mayor of Castlebridge. Now, I haven't read much Thomas Hardy. I've only read 2 on the Tower, so this is my second Thomas Hardy novel, and I really liked it. I really liked the pacing of it. I loved the story about a man who sells his wife when he is drunk, and all the consequences that fall out from that. But I hate to say this, I really didn't like the main character, the Mayor of Castlebridge. Is North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. I liked North and South. It's basically about this woman, Margaret Hale, who, you know, is from a comfortably off family. Her father is a clergyman and they live in the south of England. Things change, however, when her father, let's just say, has doubts about his vocation, so they move to the north to this industrial city, Milton, which is, I believe, modelled on Manchester. And there they meet the mill owners' family, and particularly the Thorntons. I liked the depictions of the differences between South and North. I definitely also like the depictions of life in the North, the sort of industrialness of it, the poverty in particular, workers' conditions. I really like that. I like the romance between Margaret Hale and John Thornton, but it wasn't a great romance to me. And yeah, so that is why it is a bit further down on the list. The Parson's Daughter of Oxnicon. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. I'll put the title at the bottom, by Anthony Trollope. This is a relatively short story. Obviously I read this for the short story challenge. I have a bit of a mixed relationship, let's just say, with short stories, but I actually really enjoyed this one. It is basically about the daughter of a parson at this little kind of village called Oxnicon in Devonshire, and there's only really 3 main people in this little village: herself, her father, and their neighbour. And the story is essentially about what happens when their neighbour has a nephew who comes to visit her, and how he meets the parson's daughter and what happens from there. I actually really enjoyed this. Dr. Jekyll and Mr Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. Okay, the famous book about a man with dual personalities. I enjoyed reading this. I will tell you though, it is very, very short. I am surprised how short it was. It was only about 70-80 pages, which is amazing considering that it is such an influential story. I like this for two reasons. One, the story is fascinating. The Lazy Tour of Two Idle Apprentices by Charles Dickens and Wilkie Collins. I did a full-fledged video on this. This was just so much fun to read. You could tell that the two writers had a lot of fun on their trip and had a lot of fun together, and probably had a lot of fun actually writing this. Goblin Market by Christina Rossetti. I really like this. This is actually the first poem I read by Christina Rossetti. I've heard her name before, especially associated with the pre-Raphaelite movement, but I actually had never read any of her poems, so I was really happy to read this. I just love the imagery and the associations with nature, layers of the poem as well. You know, how it can how there's sort of like, it can relate to sort of the Bible and religion, but also morality as well, and sin. I just really liked it. Barchester Towers by Anthony Trollope. This is the second book in Trollope's Barsetshire Chronicles, and it comes after The Warden, and it essentially follows on from The Warden, so I would definitely recommend do not read this if you haven't read The Warden. Essentially this book is about what happens when the town of Barchester gets a new bishop, and all the changes and controversies and misunderstandings and plottings and schemings happen after that. I really liked Barchester Towers. I think in many ways I enjoyed it more than The Warden, even though I do feel reading The Warden to help me appreciate Barchester Towers. I remember someone commented on one of my videos, I think it might be my Victober TBR, saying Barchester Towers is actually very funny, and it's true. I really just enjoyed the whole sort of church politics, the sort of scheming between sides, that sort of try and outmaneuver one another. Yeah, I just really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to reading the next book in the Barsetshire Chronicle, Elizabeth Gaskell's Mary Barson. I think unfortunately North and South was quite low down on this list because I had read it after Mary Barson, and I really liked Mary Barson. I think maybe if I'd read it a few months later, it may have been I may have rated it a bit higher. I did a full video on Mary Barson, and it is again set in the North, and it is about the character Mary Barson. This was my first Gaskell, and I really enjoyed it. It made me actually want to read North and South. Night Walks by Charles Dickens. At a certain point in his life, Charles Dickens had insomnia. So what he did was to go on these night walks across London, and these are his reflections. George Eliot's The Mill on the Floss. Now, after taking almost a year to finish George Eliot's Middlemarch, I thought to myself, no, I'm not going to read any George Eliot for a while. I'm going to give her a break, and I will read some of her work next year. But when one of the prompts for Victober was to read a coming-of-age story, and one of the recommendations was George Eliot's Mill on the Floss, I thought I would give it a go. And I really love this book. In many ways, I think I love this book more than Middlemarch. My #1 George Eliot book so far is Silas Marner, and it is a close competition between this and Middlemarch. Mill and the Floss is about a family, in particular the two children, Maggie and Tom Tulliver. And they're growing up and sort of becoming adults. It is also about the decline in their family fortunes after their father loses an important court case. But I feel primarily this book is sort of about family, and in particular the relationship between brother and sister. She really liked the character of Maggie. She was just really lovely and really that wonderful sort of high spirit energy, which I really liked. I really liked her as a character. But I really didn't like her brother, actually. Millie, I don't have a brother myself, so I maybe don't quite understand the dynamics between brother and sister, but I really felt that he was sometimes quite cruel to Maggie, particularly in her relations with Philip Wakem. That is it for another video. I really loved participating in Victober, and I really hope you enjoyed your Victober. I hope you enjoyed the books you read. Please comment on my rankings and whether you've read the books and whether you disagree with my rankings. As I said, all the books are great and I'm glad I read all of them. There was none that I really seriously hated. I will see you next video.